Welcome everyone, I'm Yashni Padiachi and this is Africa Matters. The United Nations estimates more than 1 billion people live in slums or informal settlements. 80% of them are in Africa and Asia. We talk to some Africans in Abuja, Cape Town and Accra about their struggle to find a place they can call home. According to the global NGO Habitat for Humanity, about 40,000 Africans move to cities every day in search of jobs and a better life. Urbanization, a rapidly growing population, and lack of access to mortgages means few people can afford to own a home. Let's take a quick look at the numbers and what's being done to try and solve the housing crisis. The UN says at least 3 billion people will require affordable housing by 2030. Africa has some of the fastest growing populations and cities and a housing backlog of at least 51 million units, with large variation across countries. Some governments in developing nations like Ethiopia have rolled out affordable housing programs funded by the state or in partnerships with private developers. The World Bank has also funded slum upgrade programs, but with 80 to 90% of Africans working in the informal sector, most can only afford to live in slums. Let's hear more now from Uche Igwe, a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics. He joins me from Abuja in Nigeria. Uche, thank you so much for speaking to us here on Africa Matters. Firstly, I'd like to look at the term decent housing. What is decent housing? Because it may mean something different depending on who you ask.
Well, decent housing is affordable housing that can be accessible to both the rich and the poor. I think in simple terms, this is what it means. Something that can allow everyone to have access to power, access to good sanitation, and at the same time that is affordable to both the rich and the poor, yes.
And sadly, the truth of it is that millions of people, many in Africa, just don't have access to affordable housing. What are some of the major factors that have led to the housing crisis that we're seeing on the continent?
Well, I think there are four main factors. I think the first factor is declining household income as a result of poverty. And also you can also attribute this to increasing cost of construction materials as a result of a connected factor, rising inflation. There's a lot of inflation in the continent, especially but not exclusively in a country like Nigeria, where the price of a primary product, the petroleum products were just recently increased. Also because of what we can describe as inefficient mortgage system. The mortgage institutions in Africa poorly regulated and very inefficient. So because of these four related factors, I think that the numbers of those who are interested in owning their own houses continue to decrease because of accessibility and affordability. In a country like Nigeria, in a recent survey that was conducted, 10%, only 10% of the people, who were interviewed were interested in owning their own houses. And you can compare this to 72% in a place like the United States and 78% in a place like the United Kingdom. So I think that interest is quite low across the continent as a result of some of these factors I spoke to earlier.
That's certainly a very interesting study. There's actually an organization called Slum Dwellers International. It's a network of people from more than 18 countries, mainly in Africa, and they advocate for the improvement of conditions for those living in slums. And they argue that governments actually should upgrade informal settlements rather than move people to housing projects that are closer to cities. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the right way to go?
Yes, it is the right way to go. But another related issue also is a lot of population growth. In a country like Nigeria, there is an annual population increase of 2.5%. every year, and projections indicate that there will be about 400 million people in Nigeria in 2050. And you notice that, the population increase, interestingly, they are higher in the slums. So I think that it's important to emphasize that there is a direct relationship between accessibility and affordability of this decent housing to the population increase in these settlements, in the informal settlements especially, and in the slums. The population increment there is quite high, and it's something to focus on in trying to make sure that everyone accesses decent housing.
So, Uche, you're speaking there about accessibility and affordability. Do we have examples where that is working in Africa, or does it come down to other factors that governments need to implement to try and ensure that there is good and decent housing for populations? Because once people have these homes and are settled in urban areas, it really helps the economy.
Yes, I agree with you. There's an important reform that governments need to carry out, and this is the reform in the mortgage system. If you look at functional systems like the United States and the United Kingdom examples I gave earlier, is as a result of the functionality of the mortgage institutions. So I think that in a country, in the continent, I think it's important to sort of focus in public housing schemes that are regulated by a functional mortgage system. That is an important way to improve accessibility and affordability to decent housing, because as you know, there's long-term payment plans that are arranged around these mortgage institutions. Another two important things to speak to is the fact that there is a huge informal sector in the continent. Sometimes some of these mortgage schemes are tied on formal employment, such that these things can be deducted as source for people who earn salaries. And for a continent like Africa, where there's a lot of unemployment or underemployment, it could be a challenge to tie some of these sinusoidal curve of income to mortgage system. That said, I also wanted to speak to the issue of population. Rapid population growth is also a hindrance to affordability and accessibility to decent housing. In a country like Nigeria, there is an average 2.5% growth in population per annum. What it means is that in a year 2050, for instance, you should expect that Nigeria will have 400 million persons. That's a huge number. And most of these rapid population growth, as you know, happen in informal settlements. So I think that a part of it will be a conversation around population and population growth. Another will be a conversation around total reformation of the mortgage system to make it operational as obtained in developed countries.
It's certainly some very important conversations that need to be had and plans that need to be implemented. Uche Igwe, speaking to us from Abuja, thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including...
I'm Timothy Obiezu in Nigeria, and here in Africa's largest country, a housing shortage is leaving nearly 30 million people without a place to call home.
I am Isaac Kaleji. I will show you how decommissioned shipping containers are becoming materials for building homes and offices in Ghana.
Nigeria has a growing population of over 200 million people. The country is forecast to overtake the United States and become the third most populous country in the world after India and China by 2050. But experts are warning poverty and inequality could increase if the housing problem is not addressed. From Abuja, Timothy Obizu reports.
Jason Onwe's rental contract expires in September. But after a sudden 40% increase, he's starting to look for a more affordable alternative.
It was 500. All of a sudden, the landlord comes and says, okay, from today, it's 700. Why? No upgrades, nothing.
But Jason says the houses he's viewed so far don't meet basic standards and are too expensive.
It's not quite up to what I was looking for to get with the amount that it was priced at. I think it's somehow for the house this old, it's for me I would say it's a bit overpriced.
The real estate is valued at $56 billion according to financial derivative company. The central bank says the housing shortfall has quadrupled to 28 million units in 3 decades. Poverty, urbanization, an inefficient mortgage system, and increase in construction costs have compounded the problem for over 210 million Nigerians.
Experts say only 10% of those who want to own a home in Nigeria can afford it. In February, the central bank said the country will need about $27 billion to fix the problem.
But Nigeria's real estate sector is booming and last year made up around 6% of the country's GDP. Abuja is one of the most popular cities for real estate investment, but that's not without its risks.
Demand is very high. As I already told you, because of insecurity in the state, made a lot of people relocate to Abuja. So made the price high, made demand high, and the supply is very, very low. We can have like 50 customers per day, a particular one house.
Experts say the government and private sector need to team up to make houses more affordable.
The government policy is not making anything cheap. So the developer is not a Father Christmas. If they can provide subsidy also for construction materials, we have cheap houses everywhere.
In November, the National Statistics Bureau said 2/3 of the country's population live in poverty with limited access to sanitation, healthcare, and shelter. And unless something changes soon, many Nigerians will struggle to put a roof over their heads. Timothy Obiezu, Africa Matters, Abuja, Nigeria.
The right to housing is enshrined in South Africa's constitution, yet millions of people are struggling to make this a reality. Spatial apartheid and forced removals still regularly take place in post-apartheid South Africa, with many people being evicted from areas they've called home their entire lives. On the southern tip of Africa in Cape Town, the housing waiting list is on the rise, and the city admits it can't keep up with demand. A group of residents has now occupied an old hospital and made it home. Crystal Alderson went there and sent us this report.
56-year-old Fahmida Links was born and bred in this neighborhood called Woodstock, but more than 10 years ago she was evicted and left homeless after she could no longer afford to live here. After several court challenges, she was left homeless until a group of activists came together and occupied this unused building. Now, several years later, Fahmida, her 3 children and 4 grandchildren called this former doctor's room home.
I was attending this hospital as a child. My mom had a surgery or 2 done here many years ago. Never in my wildest dreams have I even thought that I would stay here one day. And here I am, and this is my home. I have converted this space into our home, and not because we wanted to, but because of desperation.
Renamed the Senegal House after an anti-apartheid activist, 7 years later it's home to a vibrant community with more than 1,000 people living here. Fahmida and her neighbors have set up different community structures, including a community garden to help feed people and a safety and security group. The city says with the demand for housing increasing, it will have to build 500,000 new housing units by 2028 to deal with rapid urbanization. But the authorities say they can't do this alone and will need help from national government and private sector. The city has identified this area as one of several sites for affordable housing, and 200 social housing units will be built here. The city refused to go on camera but issued a statement to TRT saying the state is not able to provide enough subsidies, land or budget for the development of more affordable housing, The city says Cape Town is also situated on a peninsula, so land scarcity is a real impediment and they need the national government to help build more homes for people like Fahmida, but that is not going to be easy. Housing rights activists say the city has made more pieces of land and sites available for affordable housing, but more can be done.
We have seen some increase in investment, but unfortunately, ultimately, that hasn't really translated into more affordable homes on the ground. You know, the projects that have been announced have been stuck in interminable delays, and several of them, you know, pretty much all of them are yet to actually produce any housing.
For now, Fahmida's doctor's consultation room is home, and she's hoping and praying she'll be a beneficiary of a social housing project in the future. Crystal Audison, Africa Matters, Cape Town.
Housing is also a major problem in Ghana. Official data shows the housing market is short by about 1.8 million homes. It's also expensive for people to own or rent homes in urban centres, so many end up living in city slums. But a young Ghanaian artist may have found a way to tackle the problem. Isaac Kaleji in Accra has more.
Hey, mommy!
51-year-old Abdul Ganihu Isa shares a small room with his family of 5 in this house. The compound is crowded and it has poor sanitation, choked drains and bad ventilation. Isa isn't happy living here, but he says he has no option. He pays a monthly rent of $10.
It is a single room and the rent is a bit affordable now, but if I had money I wouldn't live here with my family. I have 3 children and a wife. The 5 of us live in this small single room. I would love to relocate to a bigger apartment, but I can't afford it.
Ghana's 1.8 million housing deficit is compounded by high rental rates, mortgages, and costly building materials. That means low-income earners struggle for decent accommodation. Eric Kwekujima, a building designer, wants to help. He has found a passion for turning decommissioned shipping containers like this one into apartments.
Somebody can virtually live in this shipping container apartment that we have here as long as the person wishes to live in. It's not something that somebody can easily break into, and it's not something that you will say is a temporary structure. There's something, if you really want to live in, you can actually put a couple of containers together to have a permanent house of it, from it. And there's something that can be done in less than, in no time compared to a regular brick and mortar.
This one-bedroom apartment, which has a sitting area, kitchen, bathroom and a toilet, takes about a month to build, and it cost $20,000 to own one. A similar brick house can cost up to $30,000. Abandoned shipping containers create an environmental problem. Putting them to good use in the city isn't new, but Jima's innovation gives it a new appeal.
At first, I thought his designs were traditional homes, but it is a container, and that is exciting. It is very attractive and will appeal to a lot of people who want to own homes.
People who live in abandoned shipping containers are considered to be from the lower classes of society. Now, giving these containers an attractive design fights back this notion. It also gives builders the chance to explore new methods of providing affordable and decent housing for millions.
Since 2020, Jima has built over 20 offices, shops and homes from shipping containers across the country.
If the metals can be able to withstand our local harsh weathers, then easy to maintain. Why not? Because then it will be a good thing to help, because I think that with time this one will be faster in putting up down compared to the local ones.
Jima is not giving up. He wants his innovation to bring relief to millions who can't afford traditional houses. And these shipping containers may be just the thing. Isaac Kaleji, Africa Matters, Ghana.
Communities are grappling with a difficult choice due to water scarcity in the arid expanse of northern Senegal. However, one man's determination to make a difference has led to a transformative movement that leverages the power of the internet. Ilyas Avci reports.
In the parched landscape of northern Senegal, communities are facing a devastating water crisis. Women are forced to travel long distances to fetch murky water from wells and rivers. This scarcity has presented them with a tough question: water their farms or quench their thirst? To eliminate this dilemma, Mamadou Daikari turned to the internet, setting up crowdfunding websites to rally his fellow Senegalese to donate towards the construction of wells for communities without access to piped water.
We tell the community that we want to build as a school, for example, or we want to build a well and we need X francs to do it. If there are people who want to give us materials, we are happy to have them. If there are people who want to take part in a fundraiser, here are the links and numbers to get involved. Right now, we are all together. We are starting work. And while we are at it, we are trying every day, or every 2 days, or every week to show how the project is progressing.
As global warming intensifies, droughts have become more frequent, with a 29% increase since 2000, according to UN data. Factors like forest degradation and desertification are drying out previously temperate areas. Future predictions indicate that droughts will worsen and last longer. Daikari believes that the internet can bring communities together to solve these water problems sustainably, without relying solely on external support. His group has successfully built over 50 wells since 2020, with 9 more currently under construction.
We raise funds exclusively through the internet. We launch fundraising campaigns from our platforms and explain the problems to our communities. We tell them that we want to build a well, for example, and we need support. We show donors how the project progresses, from a small hole to several meters deep.
While crowdfunding currently represents only a small fraction of the global market, researchers estimate that the total value of crowdfunding campaigns in sub-Saharan Africa could reach $2.5 billion by 2025. Villages like Oru Amadi Baga in Senegal are already benefiting from Daikari's campaigns.
With a small well we already had, people could simply drink, but the communities needed another water source from which they could do some gardening. Because with the existing one, we cannot garden, or else we wouldn't have enough drinking water. If we have more water, we can garden, feed ourselves, and even sell the surplus vegetables.
Daikari's efforts have given hope to these communities, allowing them to break free from the cycle of water scarcity. He prays his efforts will go beyond the immediate need of providing water. Ilyas Avci, Africa Matters.
Staying in West Africa, this week we're exploring Nabrongo in northern Ghana. The small city is known for its mud cathedral, which is one of the oldest and most significant religious buildings in the country. Let's take a closer look. And that's our show this week, but please do share your thoughts about the stories you've seen or ideas on what you'd like us to cover. On Twitter, you can use the hashtag Africa Matters. You can also watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search for Africa Matters TRT World. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Until the next time, take care. Goodbye.